Hi, this is Louisa. Today we're going to do a few short exercises specifically to focus on your back and your hips. So you may just need a head cushion, perhaps an overball if you have one, and just your mat. So we'll come to our relaxation position on your mat. So coming onto your side, rolling onto your back. We'll just take a moment to settle the pelvis in neutral, so hips level with your belly button and your pubic bone. Legs parallel with those hip bones rather than the outer side of our hips. Ribs heavy, shoulders wide and neck long, and you may need a small cushion or folded up towel just under your head to maintain the space for your neck, and we're trying to keep the forehead and the chin parallel with each other. So before we begin, let's just take a few moments with our breath. So you could place the hands on just the side of the rib cage. Try and soften and sink your body weight down to the mat, and we'll come into an inhale through the nose and an exhale through the mouth. Taking a wide breath in and a long breath out. And you can stay with the exhale through the mouth, but if you want to dabble with breathing out through the nose, that's fine too. And then once you've just settled into your breath, begin to soften through the shoulders, ease through the neck. You make that more conscious connection to your centre. So you could keep hands as they were to feel your breath, or you might prefer to move them down just towards your hip bones, just in a little. So to engage your centre, you take a breath in. And as you breathe out, you add that scoop of the tummy in and up. Perhaps you incorporate pelvic floor back to front and up as well as the tummy. And then gently releasing that on an inhale. So just taking a breath in. As you breathe out, engaging your centre, which might be tummy, it might be engaged pelvic floor and then tummy, but we're trying not to clench everything. And then inhale, slowly release. So just give yourself a chance to settle and remind yourself of your breath, your centering. Great. So then we're going to engage your tummy a little, just to draw the legs in towards you. You can either hold underneath the knees or on top of the knees. So initially just give yourself a gentle hug. You might want to take a little rock side to side, see how that feels for you. And then I'm going to just keep a little bit more space between my thighs and my body and have hands lightly on the knees, the shins are soft. So just breathing, gently centering. We'll just begin to stir the thighs and the hip joint just a few times. Pelvis pretty steady. If it feels good to you to slightly curl in as the legs come in towards you, that's fine. Just be careful as you go away that you're not letting your back arch and extend too much. We're going to do a few in each direction. And then just come back to the gentle hug that works for you. And then with control, you can lower the legs down. Could be one at a time. And just in case hamstrings are a little bit tight, we'll do a stretch here. So you can bring one leg into your knee fold position, so knee over hip. I'm going to interlace hands around the back of the middle of the thigh. You could use a band if it's hard to reach and keep length through your tailbone, or prop your head up a little more if that helps you reach. So I'm trying to keep the shoulders open, waist nice and long. Going to inhale, hug that leg in towards you, try and keep the tailbone and the waist long, and then exhale, we'll lengthen as you're pressing the leg up into your hands. And you do that about 5 times. We're keeping it moving, so hugging in, lengthening away. Try to keep that leg parallel. And after round 5, you can loosen your hands, look towards your foot, soften shoulders, and just some point and flex from the ankle. So just breathing, gently centering throughout. You may wish to give yourself another little hug there before we lower that leg back down. And then your second side can raise up, knee fold, interlace hands on the back of the middle of the thigh, or perhaps you use a band if that's easier to reach. Trying to keep the waist nice and long. We're going to hug in to inhale. Exhale, I'm going to lengthen and press the thigh into the hands. Trying to have the hands mid-thigh rather than too close to the knee. And you're trying to keep that leg as parallel as you can. So after around your 5, you can loosen hands, check the hips are square, and just gently move with some flex and point from the ankle. And then when you're ready from there, let's lower that down. And it may be for these next few exercises we're going to do that you prefer to keep your legs parallel as we are now. You could always use your ball or cushion between your knees. Some of you might like to add that we could use our gluten piriformis stretch position. So for that, you would keep the hips square, raise one leg into knee fold, and I'm turning out from the hips, and I'm resting the back of my heel is towards the top of the thigh, close to the knee, but not putting pressure on the knee. And you're still keeping that shape really neutral. So if that is a fairly comfortable position for you on either side, your knee fold, turn out, you could add that to some of the variations that we're going to go through. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start to go with some pelvic tilts and then some spine curls. So maybe as you peel your spine up higher, you perhaps can take away your head support. You just don't want to feel any compression for the neck and the head, and it's perhaps at this point you might like your prop between the knees. Possibly feet a little closer to your bottom, shoulders nice and wide, neck long. Just have arms down by your side, reaching towards your feet. So the arms can be quite heavy, but keep the collarbones open. So as you breathe out and engage your center, just begin to come into a little pelvic tilt. So I'm gently squeezing the ball and slightly lengthening and letting the tailbone lift up and then releasing back down. So you can just do a few pelvic tilts, see how your back feels. And if you feel comfortable too, you can carry that on as you begin to peel the pelvis up and then start to wheel the rest of the spine up until you get to the point where you're neutral. We take a breath there. Keep your center engaged and just lengthen and release the spine back down again. So if you have osteoporosis, that rolling movement of the spine may be contraindicated. So your alternative would be you keep the spine in one piece and you lift up in one piece. So I'm lifting up as I exhale and center, and then inhale and folding at the hips. So you can do the same, but without that sense of articulation. If your back feels a little stiff, you might prefer to lift up in one piece and then begin to find that articulation as you roll things down again. So just see where you're at with that today. Take your time. If you need to pause for a breath, just to try and work as evenly as you can through each segment of the spine, please do. So that might be the best one for you to stay with today. If you're feeling good today and you wish to add on, and the gluten piriformis stretch where we knee fold turn out was comfortable, we're going to add that to your spine curl or your bridge. Do check that weight bearing leg is in line with the hip, it's not shifted in or out for you to meet this shape, and it's a good idea to have hands close to your hips so you can check that the pelvis will stay nice and level. I'm going to take a breath in. As you breath and center, either you're rolling up or you're lifting in one piece, steady on the hips like you're standing on one leg. Breath to stay, and you can peel or float that spine back down. So see how this feels. Strong work on that supporting side, but super steady through the hips. Try not to tense up through the shoulders. I'm going to do about 4. Rolling up on your exhale, take a breath at the top, and then rolling or lowering down in one piece. Great. And then when you've landed, let's untangle and then see how that feels on the second side. So knee fold, turn out, hip square, that weight bearing leg parallel, hands on to keep the pelvis steady. So as you breath and center, you might be wheeling, you might be lifting in one piece, keeping neutral, breath to stay, and then either wheeling or floating that back down. So standing strongly and firmly on your weight bearing leg. Checking we're not tensing in the upper body or the shoulders. Hands are there just to check if you notice one side of the pelvis drop down, just to help you be aware of that and enable you to correct it. Great. And then you can lower and untangle. So see how that feels. You might want to do a normal one where you're balancing out between both sides once you've finished. And then from here, I'm going to bring the head cushion back again. And let's bring the legs and the feet together. So ribs really heavy, and we'll do some hip rolls. So if you are on the floor, you could have the arms wider. So perhaps a low V shape, palms up, or maybe wider as long as you keep the ribs heavy. Because I'm slightly narrower on this raised mat, my arms are a bit closer to me. We still want to find the shoulders nice and wide. So as you breath and center, let the pelvis and legs peel one way, neck and head can go the other way. Take a breath, you're keeping that upper back in contact with the mat. And then using that center to bring yourself back to the midline. So taking your breath in, and as you breathe out, keeling over. Pelvis and legs glued, go one way, head the other. Take a breath and then gliding it back with control. So again, we can do maybe 4 or so of those each side. Be careful the legs don't kind of run away with you or force you to arch the back. You'd rather keep hands on to keep that same distance rib to hip, that's fine. See what you need today. So you could stay with this version of your hip rolls. Another option is you take the legs wider than hip width, slightly turned out, so that my feet are towards the edge and slightly off the edge of my mat. So initially you can keep the pelvis and spine steady and just let both legs move to one side and then back through to centre and then over to the other side. So knee rolls, the legs are like wipers. So as you breathe out, centre, the legs go one way, bring them back to centre, the other way. So one leg's turning out, one leg's turning in. Do note the one coming in will not go so far, so please don't force it in any way there. And you could keep the pelvis steady, or you might like to add just a little bit of a hip roll to that movement as well. See how it feels. So you let the legs and the pelvis peel over, but you're still keeping that control of the upper body, gliding back to the centre. And if it feels good to let your head roll the other way, go ahead. Otherwise, just keep it centred. So this is hip rolls with knee rolls. And I'm going to just pause here, bringing the legs back to parallel and show you a couple of variations for your hip rolls. So if the glute and piriformis stretch was comfortable for you, you could come back to that shape now. As we're not lifting the spine, you don't need to have the foot so close in towards you. So if it's more comfortable to slide that away a little bit, you can. So that lower half still is as one unit, and you can take a little hip roll rock to each side. Again, head centered or head the other way. So I'm moving as I exhale and center, inhale to come back. So see how that feels. You're not twisting in the knee, that lower half moves in one piece. So you could stay with this position, or some of you might like to perhaps cross that top leg over the other. So I've tried to bring my legs towards the midline of my body, and that top leg is really heavy. So I'm just letting the shin dangle, hips still square. You could keep hands on, or you can just let them release as you did before. And quite a small range here, and the underneath leg and foot is still moving as one unit. You're not keeping the sole of the foot planted down. So you can add that gentle rocking side to side with control, if this feels comfortable. Otherwise you might prefer to stay with the other versions. And then we'll come back to the centre and untangle. And then for the other side, we're back into our hip width position. A knee fold, turn out, finding that glute and piriformis stretch, and just that gentle hip roll to each side. So still moving as I exhale and centre, inhale to come back. See how it feels with that heaviness through the ribs, and that lower half is moving as one unit. Great. And then either you stay with that a little longer, or you can come to bring the legs towards the midline and just cross that top leg over the underneath leg. Hips are still square, this top leg is quite passive, ribs heavy, maybe hands on or back to wherever works best for you for that hip roll position, and that gentle rock to each side. See how it feels, so still moving as you exhale and centre, inhale to come back. You can go both ways, but we're not keeping that foot planted to the mat. The foot sort of rolls as the legs and the pelvis roll side to side. Head centred, or let it go the other way. Just take a few of each of these, just balance out with each side. And then when you're ready, let's untangle. Back towards hip width, gentle engagement. You may wish to come back to that hug position, stirring the thighs in the hip joint. Notice how you feel. I hope things feel a little looser, more mobile and freer. And then you can lower the legs down, back to the mat, and we'll just gently roll onto your side to come back up. But thanks very much for joining me. Bye.